in Yeshua's name. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the goal of love in the family. The saying goes like this: practice makes perfect. It was a long time before I found out practice doesn't make perfect. What practice does is practice makes permanent. Anyone who's ever learned how to play an instrument knows it's not good to learn how to play the guitar, the piano, the saxophone the wrong way. Bad habits are sometimes hard to identify and even more harder to break once you've started them, but it can be done. Proper practice produces perfect performance. Now, perfect doesn't mean flawless, just accurate and consistent. Practice is the act of rehearsing a behavior over and over and over again to help learn and eventually master a skill. What you practice at home, you will perform on the field of life. As a foundation of civilization, the family is the cornerstone of humanity's existence. Like the foundation of a house, the family supports humanity. Do all humans agree and believe this? Sadly, no. But that doesn't change the truth of what the Creator had in mind when he established the family. The goal of love in the family is to transform humans into a kingdom of priests who are conformed to the image of Christ, who is the head of this body, that kingdom. So what do we need to practice in the home that God needs us to perform on the field of life? Well, since true ministry begins in the home, how we treat those we live with often determines how we'll treat those they represent to us as we go about in our daily lives outside the home. Life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we respond to that. Our responses will reflect what we've rehearsed and practiced. Quality family relationships help resolve conflict. We learn to work as a team. We enjoy each other's company. I don't like you. Why not? Well, we need to find out if that's the case, because that's not going to help you when you get outside the four walls of your home. Positive family relationships are built on spending quality time together, communication, teamwork, and truly appreciating one another for the way God has uniquely created and made us. So, what do we need to be working on? Well, one thing we need to work on is listening. In James chapter 1, verse 19, the Amplified Bible reads, "Let everyone be quick to hear, be a careful, thoughtful listener, slow to speak, a speaker of carefully chosen words, and slow to anger, patient, reflective, and forgiving." We should be listening with our ears and our eyes. What words do they use when they're talking? What words do they avoid? What is their body language communicating? Hear what they say before you choose to respond. When you want to understand someone, the Spirit of God will actually give you clarity and can give you clarity as to what's going on in that person's heart. In Luke 5:22, we see an occasion where this happened with Yeshua. He was aware of their reasonings and answered them, "Why are you reasoning in your hearts?" The Spirit of God gave him insight regarding that. We need to listen with our heart. We need to listen without judging or jumping to conclusions. Don't respond emotionally to what's being said all the time, assuming that you know what they're going to say next. Maybe they will say what you think, maybe they won't, but don't interrupt. Give them a chance to communicate what they're trying to communicate and express their thoughts. Don't only focus on what you're trying to tell them. Again, this is in general. There are times when we may have to deviate from these kinds of things depending upon the circumstances, but in general, we often don't give people time to talk. We give them a chance to say what they're going to say, so then we can wait for the break, and then we can say what we've been wanting to say. And these two things may or may not line up, but at least we both said what we wanted to say, but did we really communicate? We also want to listen with our time, like over a meal or over a cup of coffee. I'm always referring to Starbucks, whether it's that place or another place or even in your home. But you want to get to know and understand the other person's story. Now, just because you live with a person for 5, 10, 15, 20 years doesn't mean you really know their whole story. You may not know their thoughts and their feelings and their perspectives on certain things because you've never just sat down to have those kinds of consequences, regardless of their age. I say, like Beyonce sang in the song Dreamgirls, listen, listen, listen. There's a woman, I just call her a woman preacher. She's gone on to be with the Lord now. But Mother Crawford, she used to always say, are you listening to me? Or are you listening? That's the thing. Do I have your attention? And that's really what all any of us want when we're talking with someone is, do I have your attention, at least for these few moments? Listen so that you'll have the right response. That's what Colossians 4:6 tells us. You want to speak with gracious words, but you also want to know how to respond to each person appropriately. Now, remember, our context right now is still in the family. Why? Because what we practice in the home, in the family, is what we're going to perform when we get outside and interact with other people whom my various family members seem to represent when I encounter them. We have to, in the home, share space, right? Sometimes we have to share a bedroom, share a bathroom, share where the big TV is in the room. We also have to share our time, our talent, and yes, sometimes our money. That's what we have to do sometime. Oh my. I call them askadentals, not incidentals, but askadentals, because they keep popping up, keep asking. We also want to serve one another, though. In Mark 10:45, it talks about even the Son of Man, Yeshua speaking about himself, didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. Yahweh expects us to be givers. That's right. He has given us things. It's sort of like, if I can get it through you, I'll give it to you. Now, I don't mean sell all that you have kind of giving, but holding what God has given you with an open hand rather than a closed fist. That way he can place in your hands what he wants you to have and pass on, or what he wants you to have and hold on to. He can direct in those different ways. We should be sharing with one another. You know, the thing that they try to teach us when we were first growing up, 2 and 3 years old, share your toys, mine. That's how our attitude was. Well, we're supposed to grow out of that, as we see in Acts chapter 4, verse 32. And the congregation of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and not one of them claimed that anything belonging to them was their own, but all things were common property to all the believers. Again, this doesn't mean you give all that you have to everyone else. Examples are right in Acts 4 and chapter 5. Barnabas had some land. He sold it. He didn't sell all the land he had, but he saw there were some needs. He saw something that he could give to contribute. Ananias and Sapphira, they would have stayed alive if they had said, we sold it for this much and we're going to give this much. But instead, they said they sold the property, said they were going to give a greater amount, but actually gave a lesser amount and said they gave a greater amount. Cost them, in their case, their lives. They just should have been real. One more thing I think is sorely needed today is that there appears to be an increase of people with special needs, including physical and mental health challenges. We really need to try to understand and listen to people and see where they're coming from. You never know when you might be able to help someone from doing something that could wind up being a horrendous or horrific situation. You just never know where God may use you. Another area and place that we can practice and build up one another in our homes and practice so that we can perform better outside the home is encouraging. That is giving strength to. I mentioned Barnabas just a moment ago. That's actually a nickname, which means a son of encourager. His name was actually Joseph or Joseph, and he was an encourager. And he encouraged by what he said, how he brought people along with him, and how he also was a generous person. In 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 16, David learns that his king and father-in-law, Saul, was looking for him to kill him. So Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God, or encouraged him in God. He reminded him, that is, Jonathan reminded David of God's promise and his future for him. And he went along so far as to tell him, and I'm going to be right there to support you. I know my dad is king, but I know you're going to become the king, and I'll be right there with you because I know this is what God's plan is. That's what we need to be able to do, is to really encourage and support people, letting them know more than anything that, one, God has a purpose and plan he's going to fulfill in your life, and what role he has for me, I'm going to be there to support it. Strengthen people is another thing we want to do. In Romans 12:15, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. What is that saying? That's saying strengthen people when things are going well with them. So yes, they got that brand new Apple computer and an Apple Watch and an iPad and a few other Apple things. And God just moved on somebody to give it to them. And I'm wondering why he didn't move me over there. Well, because that wasn't for me, that was for them. So I'm glad you've got these great things, because you know what? I know God has something for me, and I'm just going to wait with my hands open, not closed, so that I can receive what he has. But we want to really rejoice with people. Someone gets a new car, they move to a new home. Rejoice, be happy with them and for them. Likewise, when things are not going well for them, be there to support and encourage them. Weep with those who weep. Hey, they're down. Don't go, get over it, or forget your feelings. Feelings are feelings, and we have to realize how we need to process those things. What some people need is just for someone to be there, be present with them. Not necessarily telling them what to do or how to get through it, but just a moment to help them or let them process what they're going through. You want to pray. Pray for your family. Pray with your family. Pray for healing in their past, physical or emotional or spiritual things that may have contributed to how they are doing right now, good or bad. Pray for wisdom for them in their present circumstances, decisions that they need to make, or associations that they need to consider with other people or other businesses, things like that. And pray that they will be faithful toward the potential God is giving them, to trust the Father to do what he has purposed and promised to do through them. We're all in that, and we all need and want prayer. So what do we know, or how do we know what to work on? Well, if you've ever been in a car, you probably are familiar with something called the warning lights. When the sensor in a car notices low fuel, tire pressure, or a problem with the engine, it alerts the driver with a warning light. When your household member annoys you, aggravates you, or irritates you, those are really warning lights, letting you know something is wrong and should be checked out. It needs to be addressed. When the warning light goes off, ask yourself something. Why is it bothering me? Is it because of something in my or their past that's been triggered? Is it a current issue? Is it a pattern that needs to be changed? When you're checking the warning light as it relates to people, before you speak to them, put the phrases on block so they don't cross your lips. Well, you always, you never, you make me. Those are terms and phrases that don't need to be in the conversation because they won't be helpful. And oftentimes they really aren't factual. Look into the Word of God and ask the Father, what's the best time and manner to address a particular issue you see that has come up? Sometimes it is in the moment, and sometimes it isn't. We all want our homes to be peaceful, but we must understand peace is not just the absence of conflict. Peace is the creation of an environment where everybody can flourish. And our first environment is home. It's in our homes the Father expects us to rehearse not grumbling with one another, so we don't bite, devour, and eat each other up, that we bear with, forgive, and seek good for one another without repaying evil for evil. Sometimes that can happen where you took my this, or why did you do that? And the thing is, how do we turn this around so that we don't bite and grumble at one another, but learn to be peaceable and sharing and to do the right thing. Because if you do something wrong, you do need to be checked. But in short, we need to practice how to love one another according to the Bible. Understand something. Mistakes will be made. Wrong notes will be played. But wrong notes can be like warning lights, letting us know something needs to be addressed. Mistakes aren't sin, but violating Yahweh's instructions, directions, and command to love, that is. The goal of family love is to transform humans into a kingdom of priests who are conformed to the image of Christ, who is the head